Actually on time for once. Wait, sing this song. Yeah, we've got no Kev tonight. He's at I think he said 60th birthday party. I can't remember now. Yeah, he's at some birthday function thing. So just me, Ronnie, and Roger, I think. So feel free to jump on anyone if you want to. I'm not actually sure what we're discussing. I don't think we've even discussed what we're discussing. It'll be one of them. I don't like the silence until they join. Let me put some music on. Hello, Jennifer. You alright? I'm just waiting for Ronnie and Roger to join. I don't want to sit in silence, so just put some music on. It's just synthwave mixes that I find on YouTube. I always listen to this kind of thing when I'm editing normally. At least Ronnie's just joined, so I can turn it down. Hi, you alright?
Hi, Andy.
I'm not sure where Roger is, but yeah, how you doing? You alright?
Yeah, Roger should be here because he sent me the link, so he should be coming himself.
Yeah, and it's just obviously just he might be busy
Oh,
with
no,
Rouge.
it was you that sent me the link, not Roger.
Yeah, I was gonna say
But you still
it
got
was me that
still
put
got
it
the link.
in the chat. Yeah, he might be
Yeah,
busy with Rouge. Yeah, it's
yes,
not to worry. I'm sure he'll
mm.
be here when he's here.
Yes, I'm sure.
Well, I don't think we've actually got a subject matter to discuss tonight, so it's going to be kind of whatever. I mean, I think Roger, we were going to talk a little bit about this farmer that apparently was attacked by a cow, um,
Yes.
which is pretty ironic considering the only attacking is the other way round. And actually, to be perfectly honest, mother defends baby from tyrant.
Well, yeah. When you think about the number of that cow's calves that have been previously taken away from her,
Yeah,
like
I mean, we don't know anything about this. I mean, that could have been her sixth or seventh calf that was taken away, and she could have been at the point where she's like, "No, fuck you, I'm not allowing this to happen," which I can
yeah.
absolutely understand. You know?
And when you think of the huge number of cows that are killed by humans, I mean, we have to remember that they're normally sent for slaughter. I think around about 6 years old,
Yeah,
uh, and they can live for 3 times that long. They
yeah. I mean, at
quite
least,
bad.
I mean, potentially
Uh,
up to like 30,
they,
35. I mean, it's so.
yeah, yeah. I've known them. Cows on sanctuaries live, yeah, up to 30 years old. certainly well into their
Well,
20s.
although they're not a great example because of the potential life. There was, I can't remember if it's a zebu or a yak now, but there was a famous one. I'm sure it was in Twycross Zoo that was like 39. So like, yeah, it's definitely possible when you actually think of 5 or 6 years. It's an absolute fraction of their life.
Fraction of their life. And it's because, of course, you know, their milk yield will start going down when they become older, and you know, there are female cows that are born, you know, into the dairy herd. You know, they're replacing the older ones with younger ones that are more efficient with the milk
Yeah.
production all the
Yeah.
time, aren't they?
And
I
we've also got to factor in that, these are absolutely loaded to the hilt with antibiotics to keep them going for as long as possible and all the hormones and everything else required. Not to mention the things like splits and all these other kind of horrible devices that exist in order to perpetuate that exploitation. And it's still, you're looking at a maximum of 10 years. Absolutely. That's
yeah,
10 years of literally being exploited every single day. And you think
I,
how many calves they have taken in a 10 years
yeah.
or 6 year span?
Well,
Yeah, it's one a year
I,
every year.
I mean, it's not. It's very rare that a dairy cow would reach 10 years. It's normally at about 6, I think, on
Yeah,
average.
well, we've if you taking, I'm talking like some of these small holding kind of places. Yeah,
Oh,
like
oh,
factory
even
farming level. Yeah, absolutely.
even ones that have them for longer. Um, and of course the other aspect of it is you get um, the male calves are no good for producing milk, so they're um, you know I think it's 60,000 um, male 60,000 or 65,000 male calves every year are killed at the age of 1 or 2 days,
Yeah.
uh, and the others go for veal production, so they'll just be killed at a few months old. They just live a little bit longer, and then the female calves are, are kept to go into the dairy herd, but even they aren't allowed to very often aren't allowed to suckle from their mothers either. There was It was interesting that when was it, a few months ago, that occupation of the that dairy farm by Animal Rising, where we saw all the calves were in these kind of igloo type
Yeah.
structures, weren't they?
Yeah.
Um, Being fed on some kind of gruel. They weren't with their mothers or suckling from their mothers, because some of the milk for them had to be substituted for something else, so that the rest of the milk from their mothers who weren't with them could go for humans.
Well,
And
there's three reasons why, for the most part, they don't allow them to stay with mothers, whether it's male or female. And I mean, a huge part of that is the bonding process. No suckling, no feeding. A huge part of that bond is completely taken away. I mean, there's a whole reason that human beings are told to have skin to skin contact and all that kind of thing initially when a baby is born. Yeah, it's a bonding process. It's quite important. It's all those things. So, and then obviously you've got the excess milk that they don't want them to take. But the other part of it as well is if they have a young that suckles from them, nature is going to realize when baby doesn't need milk anymore to stop producing, and that's a bad news because that's the whole industry. So
yeah,
yeah, all three of those factors are a big no.
that's right. But I think in order to maintain milk production, a cow will either um, have recently uh, given birth to a calf, or she'll be pregnant again. It's
Yeah.
like this constant cycle. So the milk production, you know, continues and continues and continues until the cow is, pretty much worn out. And as I said, then they're slaughtered at, quite a small fraction of their natural lifespan. So there's all that going on with the cows. All this mess. I think it's round about in the UK. I think round about, it's something like 250,000 cows, I think, are slaughtered every year. These are dairy cows that are no longer, that are sort of surplus to requirements, really, because of their age.
Yeah.
I think it's some. I think it's I think it's round. I think it's round about that figure. Um, and then I mean, the number of calves. I know with calves that there are 60,000 killed at a day or two old, but then there are far more than that actually go for veal production, and then they're slaughtered at. These are male calves normally, and then they're slaughtered at a few months old. So like horrific. And then you get like one human killed by a cow, and there's like a huge amount of fuss over it. What
Yeah,
about all the thousands of
yeah,
calves?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
What I mean, it's just great. But you see the same with other animals as well. Like if someone's killed by a shark, you look at the fuss that's made over that, and yet how many sharks are killed by humans? It's a massive number of sharks
One a
killed.
second or something ridiculous,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And we don't get the shark coming down the high street,
Yeah,
do we?
and the
Do we?
silliest thing about that is, I mean, not that it would make any difference if they were correct, but half the time when they go out on these shark hunts, they don't catch the right shark anyway. They just catch a shark. It's almost like the police just going out and shooting someone because someone's committed a crime, and it's like, well, we got to get someone for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. But just stay out of the water. You know what I mean?
That's it. Yeah, yeah.
That's there.
Or if you're going to go into the water, accept the risks that posed in the water, you know. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got family members that died going mountain climbing, you don't go and bomb the mountain. You don't go and seek revenge by
No,
taking a pickaxe to a
no.
piece of
But
rock.
there was on that score. There's a little bit of good news. I think it was it a cyclist was killed by a bear? What was that? Was it in France, something like that? And the bear was due to be killed, but the bear has got a reprieve. It's a female bear that killed. It was a woman, I think. This bear killed, and the bear's got a reprieve. But once again,
It'd be
if you
interesting to see what the
yeah.
grounds on that reprieve were.
Well, there is an article today that I saw, but I didn't actually have time to kind of read the whole thing. I just kind of more or less looked at the headline and saw what the bear had. Whether this is going to be a permanent reprieve or just a stay of execution, I kind of don't know. But the thing is that how many bears are killed by humans?
Yeah,
Huge amounts
exactly.
of bears are shot by humans. Oh man, then you get one bear killed a human, and um, everyone goes mad. And there could be reasons, like if humans just stay out of it, kind of stay out of it. We've invaded the territories of these animals, haven't we? So then, what I mean. They've kind of they've not invaded our territory. We've invaded theirs, and you have to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes me think of that case from Once Upon a Time of the monks versus the mice, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, the mice might be eating the grain, but they were there before you. They pre-existed you, so their counterclaim is you're on their land.
Oh yes, and you get this, don't you? You get this like with golf courses where they go, man, oh, we've got to go and like kill a load of foxes because a fox dug up the green. And I remember a case, an amusing case many years ago where there was a golf club was going to kill foxes for that reason. And what happened was the hunt saboteurs went and they dug up the greens and said, there you go, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Absolutely. What are you going to do? Yeah. And I mean, that is really silly, though, because you think an amateur golfer could turn up, pay their money, and just whack huge holes out of the green all over the place by
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
golf.
And after all, it's just hitting a ball with a stick into a bloody hole, isn't
Yeah.
it? So animals got an
They
animal.
cover huge areas, though, golf courses,
Yeah, yeah,
huge
they
amounts of
do.
space.
And an animal is going to lose their life because someone can't hit a ball into a hole with a stick. Now, how ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that? It's just mad, isn't it? Really, completely. Well, as well as being immoral, it's kind of insane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So anyway, I think the golf club after that they thought the hunt saboteurs can potentially cause far more damage to the greens than the foxes can, so they left the foxes alone.
Yeah. It's madness, but yeah, I remember reading before. I think it was something like the third highest proportion of land was golf courses. I'm obviously after farming. I think number one was airports, and golf courses was number three, which is
But
just ridiculous when
yeah,
you
I mean,
think about it.
farming is something like farming's a huge
Yeah,
percentage.
farming wasn't in this study because it was just it was just
No, no,
taken into
but
consideration. Yeah,
yeah, I mean of other land that's used for for other purposes. Yeah, I would imagine golf courses probably take up quite a lot because they, but all right. I'm not going to kind of, I'm not saying golf should be banned, but what I'm saying is, no animals should be killed just so people can hit a ball into a hole with a stick,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
or whatever, or kind of hit a ball with a piece of wood to stop it hitting, so, to stop the ball hitting sticks, which is cricket, isn't it? That's what that is.
Yeah.
And then you get a similar with that. If they've done some damage to the cricket pitch or something, then everyone wants to kill the moles or whatever it is, Yeah, it's just total priorities completely wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, but the funny thing is, it's like, say a football match is going on and the cat runs on the pitch. It's all like, ha ha, cat, yeah. It's all fine. It's all fine then. You see it sometimes when a cat or a dog gets on the pitch and it's all laughs and jokes. There's no,
Okay, so
why don't they bring out the gun?
I've seen that. Well, I suppose if an animal was coming along and digging up the football pitch or something, they'd probably have a different attitude. But once again, what is football? It's just kicking a ball into a net. That's all that is.
Yeah.
That's all that is. So an animal's got to die because you can't kick a ball into a net. What's the matter with you? You know what I mean? What's the most? Get your priorities right. It's meaningless, really. It's just a diversion. It's meaningless in a sense, isn't it? All that,
Yeah. Well, it is, but it serves the purpose of keeping the public distracted from the important matters, and it gives them something that they feel they've got the control over and everything else.
People will be watching Match of the Day while the world burns around them, won't they?
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Or other thing they want to watch on the telly, this is this kind of huge problem we face, isn't it? It's diversion. People are diverted from what they should be really paying attention to, and I think deliberately so. It serves the purposes of those who want to keep things as they are, to give people all these distractions so they don't do anything about it.
Yes. Sorry, Roger, you joined ages ago.
Sorry, Roger. How's Ruja?
Oh, he's on mute.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, she's had a bit of an up and down day, but she started off really, really badly. But I've managed to find some food that she likes, and she can actually eat without causing too much trouble. So the day has ended better than it started, put it that way.
New to you farming. Okay, I'll let my farm assurance and dairy. Yeah, but the problem is they both work for the industry.
Yeah.
So there's no, you let someone else independent come in and see whether you exploit the animal.
But the point is, are you saying that the cows aren't killed? Are you saying the calves aren't killed? Are you saying that the milk isn't for the calves, but it's meant for humans somehow? It's biologically meant for humans. Are those knowledgeable inspectors going to actually say that? I don't think they are.
No, the inspectors are coming in to look for unnecessary harm.
Yeah, no one's going to no one's going to deny that the cows are killed at a fraction of their natural lifespan. Nobody's going to deny that the calves are killed at a really young age, the male calves, because that's true. Everyone knows that. There's no denying that, and that is what's wrong. It doesn't matter about the conditions. It doesn't matter about the conditions. They can be kept in the most wonderful, comfortable conditions. That doesn't matter. What's the fundamental wrong is that those animals are exploited in the first place, and that those animals are slaughtered in the first place. That's what's wrong. So anything about conditions is absolutely relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the same with the numbers at the end of the day. I mean, the fact that it's 60,000 is deplorable, but even if it was one.
Well, 60. There's been a reduction because at one time it was 90, and then there was an effort to reduce it. But all that means is that those calves just get a few more months.
Yeah, and I mean those are the registered figures, right? Yeah. So they're sort of like holes in the ground. Those numbers aren't recorded.
Well, yes, but you see that all that's happened is that instead of being killed at 1 or 2 days old, those calves are now allowed to live a bit longer, but they're still killed at a really young age for veal.
Yeah.
So, and it's, and the whole thing it's all unnecessary. We don't need to eat animal products. We can live perfectly well without consuming animal products. So the whole thing, there's no justification whatsoever for exploiting animals for food or indeed any other purpose.
Just habit, convenience.
Yeah, it's just a question of just educating people. The more people we can educate about that and get them to change, then we change the culture, and then we change the way society operates.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we started, Roger, just before you joined. We were just briefly talking about the case from Scotland.
Oh, right, the farmer being killed, yeah?
Yeah. The farmer who was attacked. Shush. Sorry.
Who was attacked?
The farmer was attacked by the cow.
But I suppose if you had a human mother whose baby was constantly taken away from her, when they're a very young age, she might eventually want to. After that's happened several times, she might eventually want to kill the person that was taking her baby away, mightn't she?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably be called justifiable homicide in that sense, but
yeah, I'm sure it would be.
I mean, did it say in the article how many times she'd been made pregnant? Because that could be the key.
No, and that's really significant information.
Yeah, that could be the key to it.
Yeah, but but it's an unnecessary death, really, because what the hell are we doing, exploiting other animals for food when we don't need to? What the hell are we doing that? It's not only this mass exploitation, oppression, and slaughter of other animals that's going on, but it's also causing horrendous harm to the planet. It's a major driver. Animal farming is a major cause of the climate crisis, major cause of pollution and destruction of the ecosystem. So there's just no justification whatsoever for any of it.
No, and I mean, a farmer's not going to get crushed to death by a cow by growing oats, right? So the situation can be avoided by not exploiting others in the first place.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Unless the cow is shopping in the oat shop.
Of course, yeah. I mean, obviously, because we would have to contend with the fact that cows would take over.
Move to You Farming is saying old calves is now banned. Farming old calves. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. I read that wrong.
I think it's two-day-old calves. I think there's two comments. Yeah.
Well, there's a move. There was a big move to reduce the number of calves killed at 1 or 2 days old, and that like hugely reduced. That did reduce the number quite considerably. As far as I know, that it still goes on. But even if it doesn't go on, all that's happening is those calves are only given a little bit longer to live.
Yeah, and I mean, it's saying it's banned is the same as saying driving whilst using the mobile phone is banned, right? Not paying the TV license is banned, but like these things happen, so it doesn't mean anything. That really loose legislation that requires someone like the RSPCA to take you to court. No, it's not really meaning anything.
I mean, all that would happen if we had a situation where no male calves were killed at 1 or 2 days old, they'd still be killed at a few months old. They're not going to be allowed to live their lives out, are they? Because there's no profit in that. They're going to go for veal, and they're going to be slaughtered. They're still going to be slaughtered at a fraction of their lifespan, their natural lifespan. So it's no big deal, is it? You're just giving them a little bit of a stay of execution. It's still totally wrong. It can't be justified. No, that's all that's happening, and they think, they're great. That we don't kill them at a day or two old anymore. Yeah, but we do kill them at a few months old, as if that's like very much better.
Well, we got a film which Jennifer often points out on her lives about how an Irish farmer says that the idea is to snatch, and that's the phrase he uses, snatch the calf, pretty much as soon as they're born. But of course, it's interesting because, this story's got a lot to do with sexed semen as well. And of course, that implies artificial insemination. And, the really interesting thing about that is that farmers will claim, and I think this is true, that there's an animal welfare reason for artificial insemination.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the problem is that they don't say that they've caused the problem which artificial insemination is set to try and ameliorate. In other words, they bred bulls so large that they can't naturally mount.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Francione says, isn't it, in the start of Animals as Persons, where it's kind of like, it's not just, the welfare isn't just there to improve the lives of the non-human animals, it's also to potentially make things safer for those working in the operation. So from that point of view, AI ticks both of those boxes. Because the bulls are too heavy to mount the cows, that's better for the cows that they're AI'd. And obviously, for that exact same reason, it's much safer for the farmers or stroke whoever, because they're not putting themselves in the vicinity of two enormous animals.
Yeah, but the thing is, yeah, okay, so you get a situation where, say, no male calves are born, right? So it's only female calves that are going to go in the dairy herd, right? But for a start, how many of those, they're all going to be separated from their mothers at an early age? Well, for a very large part, they are, because they're still going to be drinking milk that it is supposed to go to humans. They want to sell to go to humans, so they're going to be taken away from the mothers. They're going to be fed on gruel, so they don't have to consume all the milk they otherwise would consume. So you're still going to get that separation in most cases, aren't you? And then they'll go in the dairy herd, and then they'll only be allowed to live a few years until they're killed to be replaced by younger cows. So it's still a horrific situation when we don't need to do it. We
absolutely, yeah.
drink plant milk. We don't. What we do in suckling the milk of another animal. Aren't we meant to be weaned at about 2 years old off our own? We're meant to be weaned after 2 years old, I think it is, isn't it? Off our own mother's milk, off milk that is meant for us from our own mothers, right? Yeah. And then what happens is we stop drinking that, and then we suckle the teat.
Well, it's baby food of another species, isn't it?
Yeah. So what's going on? It's just crazy, isn't it? And when there's all these alternatives that don't come from the exploitation of other animals that we could use instead.
Yeah, but doesn't that really show as well, though, the fact that milk has become, in general, whether it's plant-based or dairy, milk has become such a huge part of everyone's life and diet that there is that huge need for the replacement in plant-based milks, as opposed to just thinking, well, we'll just do without it.
Well, yeah, you see, because I think about 68% of the world is lactose intolerant.
Yeah.
You see, and so they wouldn't be thinking in terms of like replacing the milk with something else, because that's not ever been part of their diets. Yeah. See, this is what we don't realise. What's happened is the reason why so many people we get a lot of lactose intolerance in this country still. A lot of people are lactose intolerant, but the reason why lots of people here aren't lactose intolerant is because, like, obviously, people over here have been drinking milk for hundreds and hundreds of years. And of course, what happened way back is the ones that were lactose intolerant died off. They didn't know it was lactose intolerant. They go, that person's ill and they died, or they're too ill to, to produce children or whatever. That came from lactose intolerance. We didn't know it. So what's happened is our population here has been genetically selected to have more tolerance for lactose, because the lactose intolerant ones died off, right? Whereas in other countries where they've never had dairy, the vast majority of people in those countries are lactose intolerant. So that's why most people in the world are. And they wouldn't, their way of, eating and drinking is like completely different. So they wouldn't be thinking about, I need something to substitute for my milk in my
Oh,
tea.
that's a really interesting and valid point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because their cuisine is like is like the way they
Because
eat.
you're absolutely right, and it just really, when we think of where we are like, in terms of the Western world, so to speak, then one of like the sort of stereotypical memes you'll see on the vegan funny pages is like a milk powder reference because it's everywhere, whereas I suppose they don't have that issue.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's only really a problem in a select few places. It's just that that's
yes.
really relevant to us. Yeah, okay, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean that doesn't mean that, um, um, creating drinks from oats or whatever whatever vegetable product is used to, because you get potato milk now as well, hemp milk, and there's all sorts, loads of different
Yeah,
plant milk.
I'm gonna be honest. I've had
Yeah,
potato milk a few times now, and it's all right. It's okay.
yeah.
I haven't got a problem with it. I think it's all right. I wouldn't say it's like delicious, but I think you can buy it sometimes for as low as like 28 pence a litre, and
Oh,
it's
right.
absolutely worth buying. Yeah.
That sounds. I've never had it. I've had pea milk. You know.
Well, I can't
Yeah.
remember. I got given the first one by someone, and I tried it, and I was like, I don't know what it'd be like in a hot drink, and I had it a few times, and I cooked with it and stuff like that, and then the boys had it in cereal, and they said it's actually okay, and now a few times I've picked one up, and the kids have just used it without even reading it, so it must be okay because they'd moan otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
At that sort of
I
price,
think it, I
people have
think
said
it's. I
for a
mean,
long time
I know.
dairy is cheap, but that's literally like I said. I think
Yeah.
heron or farm food, you can get it for less than 30p a litre. So no, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous in terms of price. If price is the
No, you
problem,
can. In certain places you can. Um, uh, but yeah, so there's this vast variety of different plant milks that people can choose from, so they can find the one that they like the best. Different people like different ones, don't they? I mean, I tend to go for oat milk, really, if I can.
yeah,
Um, and of course, oat milk is something you can even make yourself if you want from oats.
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
There's recipes for how to. And that is something that we could produce from. We wouldn't have to import anything in order to do that, because of course we can grow oats in this country, and so we could produce the oat milk um, from crops that are grown here. You
yeah. And
know,
I mean, like
uh,
like I said, there'd be much less. I mean, I'm not going to say that nobody's ever had an accident farming plants, but there's a much less risk, sorry, of you being squashed by a big mammal by growing oats. So if that's potentially a risk that you're taking most days, you could eliminate that risk and the oppression that you're causing. So
yeah,
two big
yeah,
wins. Not only you're benefiting, but they're benefiting too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I mean, like I mean, quite a lot of countries they think it's like really weird that people put milk in tea, because
Yeah.
they just think, what you're doing that for. They don't do it, so it's something, it's kind of something that kind of we do over here, and we're kind of used to, and so if they want to put plant milk in their tea, fine. That's as long as no animals are being oppressed or exploited for it, then okay, and that's what people are used to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Was there anything that anyone wanted to discuss today? Because we haven't got a subject matter. We've just kind of besides that
Well,
farm story, that was kind of the only thing
well,
that. So yeah, we
we,
could talk about our little thing.
yeah, our community vegan outreach thing, Andy, that we're just in the process of kind of setting it up, aren't we? Really. Um, I think kind of where the idea came from is obviously like vegan outreach is really important to educate as many people as possible to go vegan. And what tends to happen though is that it mainly takes place in the centre of big cities. You have things like Cuba Truth, for instance, don't you? And there's Earthlings Experience, and there's a lot of these things that involve people with screens, with videos and stuff, a lot of it tends to be based on that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that happens in the centre of big cities mainly, and people come from all around in the centre of big city, do the outreach. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is there's so many places where no outreach takes place, suburbs of cities and small cities, towns, even villages. And so it's really important that we get vegan outreach everywhere, and we get it, and that we get it kind of on a community level. And that's what community vegan outreach is about: is to encourage people to kind of do a vegan education within their own community. And so we're sort of in the process of setting something up to help and encourage people to do that, aren't we? And I think we're going to mainly concentrate on our own county first, aren't we? To see
Yeah,
what we
I
can.
mean, if we could set sort of like a template that others could replicate, so to speak, and go and do themselves, if we could make it a success in one place, then I suppose it makes it easier for people to just kind of do their own thing, doesn't it? If we can say,
Yeah,
look, this is definitely working, you can come and see it for yourself, so to speak, and yeah, I mean, but I think a lot of people, to be perfectly honest, and I mean, watching the whole that's happened at Vegan Street over in Ireland with Graham and stuff, and seeing how quickly all of that's kind of developed, I think there are a lot of people out there, especially those that were already active, say before COVID, that are eager to get back out again, but like they just need that spark, or they just need that pat on the back, or that sort of words of encouragement to do it again. And potentially that's a big part of our focus, isn't it? It's more about the support and encouragement of those people that already are willing, for the most part, because there are a lot of them. I know there's a lot of people that do want to be involved in things, and it's kind of just like life has got in the way.
I think COVID. The problem with COVID is it kind of broke people's habits, and we all got into different habits, didn't we? And then because like humans, well, I think all animals are creatures of habit, really, and so are humans. Um, and that people got out of the habit of doing things and got into the
Well,
habit of.
yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that COVID did as well to a lot of people is it kind of stemmed their socialization. People were limited to very small groups of people, close family, that sort of stuff, and so like their interaction with the public has, I think, has become more limited since then. I mean, think about going like shopping and all of that sort of stuff during lockdown. People were kept apart. You weren't allowed to interact, and a
Mm.
lot of people have sort of said, "Oh, I preferred lockdown because people stayed away."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I've noticed that's kind of crept into it too. That a lot of people have become reluctant to engage.
yeah. Well, yes, I think people got in the habit of kind of not engaging, not going out and stuff, and they've kind of carried on with that, afterwards. And I mean, I know people. I know, at least one. Well, I know more than one person where they were very active in promoting veganism before lockdown, and then when lockdown came, they kind of got into other things because they couldn't get out on the street anymore,
Yeah,
and so they've kind of not gone back to it because they got in the habit of doing something else, and so we kind of, it's important to encourage those people to kind of get back into outreach again. But I think there's also a lot of other people that kind of would get involved in outreach if they got a little bit of help and encouragement and a little bit of hand holding,
yeah,
to
absolutely. Yeah.
get them used to it. And so, like, because it's the first time that all of us did it,
Yeah,
isn't
I mean,
it?
let's be perfectly honest. I mean, for a lot of us, veganism is kind of our comfort zone. It's kind of like where we feel comfortable talking about and all that sort of stuff. But it's still scary. Like, there's times even now, sometimes before I do anything, where you still get those sort of like jittery sort of feeling before something starts. So it's a natural thing, yeah. And I think a lot of people, if they just realise that actually you're not being asked to go and speak about classical music, you're going to speak about a subject that you probably know better than any other subject. Because most
Yeah,
people do. So it's like you're actually in your comfort zone for the most part, but it's just getting over that fear of doing it the first
I,
time. Yeah.
I think so. And I remember, the first time that I ever, um, I decided that I wanted to do kind of street education. I was really nervous. I'd never done it before. I'd always done activism that didn't involve the public, and so I was, I was nervous, and so I went with some other people that had been doing it for a while and kind of helped them And first of all, I kind of stayed a little bit in the background and watched what they were doing, and then I gradually got more involved. And then I kind of ended up just going off and doing it myself,
Yeah.
because I got to learn how what you do and how you speak to people and stuff, and it's just kind of building that in other people, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, although I don't think it's a huge factor, but one of the things that I think probably does play a little factor in people's minds as well is a lot of the clips that they will see of a lot of others doing outreach, especially like YouTubers. Obviously, that's all selectively edited to show the drama, to see the people that are hostile, to show the aggressors, to show, those kind of situations. You don't very often get a nice, placid conversation get shared. It's normally the controversy that gets shared. So I think that puts a lot of people off as well. The expectation that, like, 1 in 3 people is going to come up and have a go at them, when in fact that might not happen ever.
Well, no, I mean, to be quite honest, locally, when I'm involved in doing vegan information stores locally, we don't. I can't remember the last time anyone really came up and kind of started arguing. You get the odd people that walk past and shout,
Walk past and make stupid
Hurry on
comments, usually like little gangs of kids
you
and
get
stuff.
that.
Yeah, but actually come
Stop.
over and no, I mean, like I say, it doesn't very often happen. Yeah.
They don't come over. They go, I like my steak. But then because they probably they kind of think that they probably wouldn't be able to back anything up if they did talk to us, so they kind of hurry on their way, and so you're not in a conversation with those people. Even that, I find, doesn't happen a great deal. And what I tend to find is that people are interested, that people have already heard something about it, and they're almost pleased. They seem pleased. They go, oh, great. I kind of want to know more about this.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't. Like I said, I don't think it's a massive factor, but I do think it contributes to a lot of people who their nerves and their worries about what might happen on the street comes from watching some of these videos where it's all selectively edited, where all 3 people just happen to be really controversial. But it's like they might have been sat there for 8 hours and they've shown you 3 different people and they've spoken to hundreds.
It depends on what you do. See, we don't, we locally don't do that type of outreach. Basically, that kind of where you're almost looking for a confrontation with someone, or a debate with someone. We just have a stall where we advertise that we've got information, that we've got free recipe booklets, that we've got information. We have our posters and our placards to attract people up to the store. And so when people come up, they're wanting that information. If you see what I mean, people aren't.
No, I absolutely agree. Although, I mean, I do know that those things can be quite effective. And I mean, obviously, sometimes there's a massive problem with the language that people display on some of those signs. But I know that there's a place for that, and that can be quite effective. But for me personally, and I guess it might just be me, the way that I look at it is, if I'm going to set a platform where it's like, this is about veganism, come and debate me, I'm allowing people to think that veganism can be debated, whereas as far as I'm concerned, it can't. So it's pointless having a conversation. Like, there's no point you trying to debunk something that's undebunkable. So there's no point us having a debate about it. There's really not. If you're interested in having a conversation about it, great. But you coming over with the idea of trying to challenge veganism, which I don't think can be refuted, I think it's a waste of everybody's time.
There is a middle ground, actually, because as Ronnie said, I think that people are vegan curious nowadays, and so you get them coming up asking for more.
Yeah.
And rather than engaging them in a debate, we started doing the tea station, and I'm sure you're both aware of what that means. But the interesting thing about that is that I've never seen the tea station being replicated anywhere else ever. And the thing is, it's a really, really good way of doing stuff, because people sit down and they have a cup of tea and they talk about veganism, and it's non-threatening. They can take as much time as they want. They don't feel any pressure to move away and everything. And it really is a good thing for people to try to do. It takes a little bit of an effort, but you only need to have something about the size of a card table and a pump pot and some paper cups, or better still, just cups that you then take back and wash up. And then you can have a range of herbal teas or whatever and stuff, and you can have black tea and you can have a carton of soy milk there, right? It really does change the atmosphere of the entire event, because people come up and they'll see people having a chat and all that, and so you tend not to get very bolshy people when you've got other people around just kind of having a reasonable, rational chat. You know what I mean? So it kind of changes the feeling of the thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. If people have got the resources to be able to do that, I mean, I think because there are probably
It's not expensive, Ronnie.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about in terms perhaps of. I mean, you'd have to have like at least one person that kind of was kind of overseeing the tea station, wouldn't you? I suppose. And
Well,
then
no, we used to just have the tea station stood on its own, and then if people came up to the stall and started talking, after a while, if they seemed interested, the volunteer would go, well, look, we've got a tea station here, it's a little cafe area. Do you want us to have a sit and, I'll make you a cup of tea and we can carry on there if you like. And that's what tended to happen. And in fact, we actually knew at least one prominent activist in Ireland who started by coming to the tea station. And
yes, I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea. If people are able to do that, yeah, I think that's excellent. I think it's I think it's great.
Well, yeah, we've had this discussion before as well. I mean, even if you take the kind of debate side out of it, people, if you sort of stand and have a chat with someone on the street, there's a natural instinct from them to want to go away. They want to continue with whatever they were doing, wherever they were going.
I think it's a social circumstance, Andy, in the sense that you've got people moving around behind them and all that, and they're kind of glancing around quite often, and they'll be in mid-sentence and somebody will say something which will kind of throw them off their thread. Whereas when they're sat down, it's a lot more calm. True. And so that's the advantage of it all. Mm. And you just don't have that kind of, I'm here to debate you, I'm here to argue with you. It's I'm here to answer any questions that you've got about veganism. And so if that's the setup in the first place, people approach it with that in mind. And so that's it, it's as simple as that, really.
And I mean, it is a valid point too, that there's a lot more sort of vegan curious people now. The vast majority of conversations that I have that are actually in any way interested, they're what they know about veganism is that it's a diet. So the first thing that kind of is like, oh, see, I just thought it was this. So they have got an idea about it. And so some of those conversations are really productive just in that sense. Even if all they've done is gone away thinking, well, this is a lot bigger than what I thought it was before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's what happens quite a lot in Dublin. We get a lot of conversations which end by the people saying, "Oh, I didn't think it was going to go this way. I thought it was going to be that you're going to talk about, oh, it's all cruel and that I'm a murderer and all this kind of stuff, right?" And of course, they don't get any of that from us. And so, yeah, in that sense, just going back, can I just, because I missed the beginning, can I just go back to the Scottish farmer? Because I don't know whether you read out the article.
No, we didn't read out the article. No.
No, well, I've got the BBC one, which I think is the one that everybody's seen, and it's interesting because they're talking about the inquiry or the inquest. That's not probably an inquest, but inquiry into the guy's death, and it's really interesting because the guy's son seems to be hinting that he's a bit critical of his dad here. For example, he suggests that on the day of the accident, his dad had planned to move the cow and the calf. So whether that means separate them, it's not clear, but let's just assume that it was just to move them both, right? But apparently he tried to do it with a quad bike. So he's flying around a field with a quad bike, and you've got a mother who's not long given birth, right? And so, she's going to be unhappy with having a human bombing around, God knows the speed, right?
Yeah, we all know how moving them with a quad bike means. It means putting the calf in a trailer and driving quite slowly that Mommy chases.
Yeah, that's right. Also, it says here, his son told the inquiry that he believed the cow had felt threatened and attacked his father. So it's really interesting because it's interesting how journalists work, because you've got that line, the cow felt threatened and attacked his father. I mean, like,
So self-defense.
yeah, and but
Literally, even then, self-defense. Then
yeah, but I mean, that's not going to come up in the headline, is it? Because it's
no,
not sexy enough.
no. I'm actually surprised that they've included that, to be honest, because the felt threatened is justification.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you're threatening a mother, as Ronnie said earlier. I mean, and you don't know how many times this has happened to the same individual either.
No, absolutely not.
You know, it's quite shocking in that sense, I think.
It's surprising in a sense. It kind of doesn't happen more often, I think, to be honest. These are very
I mean,
rare
I've talked
cases.
about this before, though. It kind of shows that we have chosen to exploit the most docile and friendly beings that we potentially can, right? I mean, pound for pound, more efficiently, we would be to milk rhinoceros or elephants, because they produce far more milk than a cow, but they'd be crushing people a lot more often, which is why they don't do it. So
But
it
yeah,
really is that simple at the end of the day. Like, sadly, we exploit those because they are the easiest to exploit. They put up the least resistance. I mean, I've thought about it loads of times, although it sounds really horrible, that like there's one farmer in a field and 20 or 30 cows. They could trample them into the ground and nobody would find them again, but they haven't got that in their nature.
No, they're not. No, but
mm,
you see in other areas, like for instance, why they use beagles for experiments. You
Yeah,
know that.
again, another perfect example. Yeah,
yeah,
because
they're
of the
docile and they've
breed,
got
the
short hair.
docileness
That's
of the
right.
breed. Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't use Rottweilers, right?
No.
So yeah, again, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
And
It's,
they don't
it's
use tigers. Here, kitty, kitty.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's
no,
always the same. It's you know, it's rabbits and mice and rats. You know, they don't go and use wolverines.
no.
Yeah, I always tell the story that when I was part of the NAL, the Northern Ireland Liberation League, we got arrested for something, ended up in a police cell, and there's this other activist there, and he said to me, he kind of had tears in his eyes. He said, "Do you think it's possible that cows, you know, they could fight back, but they're just kind of like pacifists, and so they won't? Because, like you said, Andy, they could really make a mess."
Absolutely, just one cow. I mean, I made this point in a video ages ago that even if it was one cockerel versus a human, and the cockerel could absolutely understand Mad Max style in Thunderdome, one enters, one leaves, so to speak, like, and they understood that a cockerel would really give a good go against the human. A cow, a pig, they're all beating you. I'm sorry, they are. If they know
Well,
what's
I
going
can
on.
attest to the cockerel thing, because at the back into Daylight Animal Sanctuary, there's a cockerel called Russell, and he fucking hates me. And
Yeah, and if they understood, I mean, literally, you could make them understand that this is your one chance at freedom. You have to beat this opponent. Yeah, I think all of those animals would beat us. Yes, one versus one. Yeah.
yeah, Jim
I
Harland, let me just address this one. Yous have never handled or worked with cattle, have you? Well, be careful what you dream of here, Jim, because there's quite a lot of now vegans who have worked with so-called cattle and have done all kinds of things. And what they say about farming is absolutely horrendous, because they've actually seen it, and they're seeing their dads do it, they're seeing their brothers do it, and they are absolutely scathing about what happens on farms.
That's right. At the end of the day, though, you know, whether or not we've ever worked in farming, it is still the case. It is still the case that those cows and those calves
Yeah, I
are
mean,
all.
Ronnie, have you ever worked in a coal mine? Yeah, you ever
I
dug
haven't.
cobalt
I
or
haven't.
gold or diamonds? No, but I know it's oppression, so I'm still against
Yeah,
it.
yeah, but it's irrelevant whether or not any of us have ever worked on a farm. Is totally irrelevant, because the facts are that those animals are still exploited by humans. They're still oppressed by humans. They're still sent for slaughter at a fraction of their natural life to provide food that we don't need, and where we could live perfectly well and healthily and happily without exploiting animals. And so, therefore, it's wrong. And whether or not we've ever worked on a farm is totally irrelevant.
Yep. I mean, I mean, just to completely nip it in the bud, I'm vegan because of my time on a dairy farm. So there is no point here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's right. It's interesting. I was at an event in London a couple of weeks ago. This was We Stand for the Animals, which is it was like a kind of vegan outreach event, and there were various speakers, vegan speakers, and one of the guys that spoke, who's a very active vegan campaigner now. He was a slaughterhouse worker at one time, and then he owned a chicken farm, and then he realised that it was wrong, and became vegan, and now he's a vegan advocate.
Yeah, and
So
I mean, we are talking about Doug, right?
yeah, Doug, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So like, and he's very active, very, very
yeah, yeah,
active. You know, one of
yeah.
those that's out 4 or 5 days a week. So yeah, absolutely, perfect example.
And the guy a guy called Howard Lynham, who he
Yeah,
owned
and Harold Brown as well.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, and Howard Brand, and you've
Brown.
got the Lawrence guy from
Yeah,
Dorset as well. Yeah, I
yeah,
can't think of his surname.
And
Yes.
Declan Bowen in Ireland.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, you've got
there's
people.
lots. I mean,
Yeah,
there's lots and lots of examples because there's about
loads.
4 or 5 in America as well that I don't know the
The guy,
names of.
the guy. I think what was it? Was it Howard Lynham? Is that the right name? He owned the second largest ranch in the USA. Ranch animals. Uh,
Yeah, I think
for
he was one of the biggest purchasers of
it was the
pharmaceuticals at one
it was
time, wasn't
huge. Yeah, the need for all the cows and bullocks and everything. And he was the second largest rancher in the USA, and and then one day he just it just came over him. What the hell am I doing? He's sending all these animals to their deaths, and it's like
he?
just
Well, also don't forget his doctor said that he was going to die, right? And he said that if you go on a plant-based diet, you might be okay for a while, and he's been okay ever since. So there's that as well.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I know at one time he was going around the world, giving talks, wasn't he? And
Yeah.
so and so he, became an avid vegan and a vegan advocate because it dawned on him, what how am I doing? I'm responsible for this mass suppression, this mass slaughter of these animals, and it's all none of it needs to happen. None of it needs to happen, and so that was a huge change he made in his life to go from
Yeah,
that.
I mean, personally, I would argue there's a better case to be made that those who grew up on farms or around farms find it much more difficult to see the truth because of that confirmation bias that they see. So when you say you've never spent any time on a farm, it's almost like you've never spent any time off of one. So if that's your claim that you have no idea of what's going on because you've never spent any time on, I could make the counterclaim that you're sounding like someone that's never known anything but, and therefore you're not able to make the same recollection that we are. We could look at it from both sides, and you're not able to do that.
Well, Jim's coming back with an interesting one. Do you realise different breeds of cattle, so-called, have different characteristics, such as,
Well, yeah, I'm sure they do, but how is that? It's not relevant. None of it's relevant.
Well,
None of
no,
it's only
any of
relevant,
this.
but more so against the case. It means, yeah,
None,
okay. So what the breed that's docile and quiet are the ones you choose to exploit. So further
yeah, they've probably
proving
been
you
bred.
oppress the weakest or who you consider the weakest of other species. It doesn't help the point. It hurts it.
I would imagine.
maybe Jim can answer me a question here. I've always been fascinated by this limousine breed. There must be a reason for why they were called that, right? And if they are wild and unpredictable, there must be a reason why they are still being used because, like Andy says, they'd probably choose the more quiet and docile, right? So, I mean, I was born next to my uncle's farm in Yorkshire. My uncle Clary. I mean, I used to always be begging him for a lift on his tractor. Like it was one of those really little old-fashioned tractors with the little diddy kind of wheels at the front. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. When he let me on it, and I used to get into the barns and eat the cattle cake because it tasted really nice. I was just a kid. And yeah. So I mean, there's loads of vegans who have experience of farms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my mum was a farmer's daughter, She grew up on a farm. So we've probably all got some kind of connection with animal farming because it's so prevalent, isn't it? But the bottom line is that why are we sort of carrying out this mass suppression and exploitation of other animals when, especially when we can survive perfectly well without doing it? You've got the choice of living in two ways. Either like we carry out this mass wrongdoing against other animals, or we don't do it. And surely the choice we should make is not to do it, isn't it? As beings that can make a choice.
Okay, well, hang on a minute. I'm still kind of intrigued about what Jim is saying here because limousines produce good calves. They're good parents mostly, and they're hardy. So he was juxtaposing limousines with Holsteins a minute ago. So does that mean that Holsteins don't produce good calves, and that they're not good parents, and that they're not hardy?
Well, I'm guessing that's the insinuation, yeah.
And Joanna makes a great point about and the different personalities in cows, even within a breed.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you can recognise that just it goes against the case that they're just objects, doesn't it? Objects with different personalities.
They're all individuals. I knew. Interesting enough, talking about cows, but you'd like talk about hens. And people would probably think, even less than cows, like, all hens are the same, right? Well, I've got a friend who used to run a sanctuary for rescued hens down in Sussex, and she had several hundred hens. And I was on my way to see some other friends, and I called in to her rescue this is quite some years ago, and I kind of helped her for the day, helped her feed the hens and everything for the day. And she said, oh, some of these hens kind of need special medication and everything, and I have to separate them out. And I said, how do you know one from the other? Because they're all the same. They're all this kind of Rhode Island red type. Most of them were, those. And she said, point to any hen here, and I'll tell you the story of that hen. I think I think they all had names.
Yeah. I mean, the sanctuary I used to volunteer at, I think there was 50 odd, and it took me a little while, but I worked out their names and I could recognise who was who. Yeah, it took me a little while, but yeah, absolutely, yeah.
She'd given them names so she could, she could kind of like refer to them, and kind of that helped her in knowing their kind of needs. And everyone pointed to, she said, oh yeah, that one, I got that one from so and so, and that one's, what their personality was like, if they had any special needs. And and there were hundreds of them, and she knew every single one, and they were all different.
Yeah.
They're all individual.
Yeah, they've all got their own little quirks and personalities, and they all have their little own social structure as well, and you'll know who bonds with who and who doesn't get on with who and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what she was telling me. Yeah, all of that. Incredible. But like, because they all and to me they all look the same.
Yeah.
But she knew one from the other.
Well, I suppose it's kind of the same. Sometimes, let's just say you had, I mean, you're not obviously going to have one, but let's just say you had a litter of black Labrador puppies. It would be the same, right? They'd all look the same, but you'd know, once you'd named them, you'd know which one. It wouldn't take too long for you to go, oh yeah, that's this one, that's this one, that's this one, that's this one. People that came to visit wouldn't know, but you would.
Oh yeah, because you're used to them, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the same. I used to volunteer every single Monday at the sanctuary. So it took me about 6 months to work out their little groups and stuff. But once I knew them by name, I remembered their names, and I was right. It's kind of, it just takes a little while to learn. But yeah, absolutely, they're all individuals, completely.
Yeah. I mean, I knew somebody that had a sanctuary for cats as well, where she had about 300 cats, and they were kind of free roaming cats. Really, I wouldn't like to be, an animal living in the wild around where she was with all those cats. Yeah. But she was the same. She knew every single one.
Yeah. No, because I
Uh,
mean, it brings up some interesting points as well. Like, if you take somewhere like a sea life centre, and let's say hypothetically they've got 10 dolphins, there's a good chance that they haven't all been caught at the same time from the same place or been sired by the same parents because they swap and buy in all the time. So I mean, just like, for example, if I took a person from France, a person from Spain, a person from Austria, and a person from England and put them in a house together, they wouldn't be able to communicate. I mean, is it not possible that that's the same with other species? That taking a dolphin from one part of the world and a dolphin from another part of the world and shoving them in the tank together, they potentially can't communicate. They're the same species, of course, but language-wise and cultural-wise, and even what they're climatized to and what they're used
Well,
to, and
do
all
you
of
know that
those
some
things.
researchers have found that birds, for example, have got regional accents?
I mean, this is what I'm saying. Yeah, just because
yeah.
they're both killer whales, for example, they're both bottlenose dolphins, doesn't mean they can communicate with each other. I
Well,
mean,
the
like
reason.
you can see it within dogs, right? They're both the same breed of dog. Does that mean that they're going to be the best of friends? Absolutely not. No,
No.
So yeah.
The reason why people have different languages really, comes from a time when um, communities were more isolated from each other, and that community, you know, they only spoke within themselves, so they developed a particular sort of language, and then that's all been kind of then obviously people spread from one place to another, so you've got variants of languages and stuff like that. But you see with these animals, if animals of the same species but from another part of the world, if they have a communicative language, then that's going to be the same as humans, isn't it? That
Hmm.
those languages are going to evolve separately, so
Yeah,
they're not improved.
absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you mean and it's one of those things that's never taken into consideration because I
no,
mean I know that what obviously besides the fact that they're exploited and in captivity, one of the things that happens a lot, especially to the whales, is that they attack one another and like the fact that they can't potentially communicate is I've never seen it considered as a factor
no,
when you think it would be right up there.
they wouldn't think of that at all. In I mean, basically, their main thought is for the money they can make, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Really. But yes, I mean that's kind of, but probably something people don't think much about. They probably think they're the same species, so they can communicate, and that wouldn't. I mean, on kind of a very basic level, they could probably communicate, but on any kind of higher level, that they wouldn't be able to, would they? If they're from different parts of the world.
They
No,
only
no,
use
absolutely not.
Esperanto.
Yeah, they need to. Yeah, yeah. It's a
Yeah,
shame.
and and again, this might be extrapolating maybe too far, but at the same time, it's the same with the cultures and the traditions and the habits of those animals. They might be completely different in how they choose to feed and all these different things too. So, like, there might be so many differences between them that they're just total strangers. They just look the same.
Well, yes. So we compare, the culture we have here, say, with the culture in China or in Japan.
Yeah.
Is isn't there? I
Yeah,
mean,
same as in terms of what they can deal with in
yeah,
terms of heat, weather, blah, blah,
yeah,
all of these things. Yeah, there's so many differences. Never get talked about.
yeah.
You were talking about how humans know each and every one in sanctuaries and stuff. I would tell the story about we were on one of the Dublin canals on the side, and there was a family of ducks, and I think there was 9 ducklings, and the mother went over to the far side, and 8 ducklings went with her, right, and then they're all doing their stuff. And then suddenly, about a minute or so in, the mother duckling started panicking, right? And then kind of looked around, and then came steaming across to the other side again and retrieved the 9th duckling who had kind of kept on the near side, as it were. So that must mean that she counted them.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Would know that they were not absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then she realised one was missing,
Yeah.
and yeah, yeah. Oh,
And yeah,
absolutely.
and it's interesting that you said the first reaction was panic, like a mum, right? Like a mum that's lost their kid in the supermarket. What's the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
instinct? Panic, of course. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, because I mean, she was really agitated, looking around and everything. Yeah, Jim, I think I misspoke there. I meant the mother of ducklings, obviously. But yeah, she really panicked. She was kind of looking around and everything, and then she spied the duckling who had not come over and came bombing over, leaving the other 8 to take the one back. You know, so I kind of goes, she must have counted them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only explanation, isn't it? It's the only explanation to that.
Yeah.
And probably knew, she would have known all of them individually, wouldn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if it's not counting in the way that we think, she'd know that there was that many scents. She'd know there was that many
Yeah,
smells that she's like, or however it is, however it's communicated. Yeah, absolutely. One was missing.
She probably looked around and went, "Where's Ronnie? Come on, Ronnie's missing. Let's find Ronnie."
You better
yeah,
somewhere leafleting.
yeah, yeah. But we'll keep you updated, you know, and Andy and I'll keep everyone updated on how our project's going, won't we? It's only right at the very beginning, but you know, as time goes on, hopefully, you know, we'll get more people involved in stuff and that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly do think for a lot of people, they just need that little spark. And
They just need someone just to give them a helping hand,
yeah,
read at the beginning and get, you know, kind of get them.
which,
Because
which at the end of the day, we all did. We all need, you know, there
we
was
all,
always someone that kind of did this for us and sort of brought us into it, so to speak, and let us learn. So yeah, exactly that.
yeah, that's right. Because I mean, we've got so many towns in our county where there isn't any outreach, and you know, it would only take 1 or 2 people there to get stuff going, and even 1 or 2 people can do a lot, you know, if they're committed and, you know, determined to do it. You know, a small number of people can achieve a great deal.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. What if she heard the squawks of a duckling in distress more plausible than counting?
Well, I
Well,
suppose
I suppose
No,
it
but
is.
I
Yeah.
was there. I was there throughout, and the duckling was just busy doing duckling things on the near
Yeah, yeah, I
side.
was going to say, from how you described the story, the duckling doesn't seem to be in any trouble. It's just the fact that the mum noticed they didn't swim across at the same time, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so I mean, the duckling was fine, just kind of doing their own thing, but just hadn't followed with all the rest as presumably they're supposed to.
Yeah. So yeah, that's mum's awareness. I mean, but we do see it. We do see it all the time. I mean, I'm sure, Jim, even to use an example that like the test. I mean, the sheepdog potentially knows if there's one sheep missing, right? Is there any difference between those things? Or is that different because that's a working thing, so that plays into the narrative, so that's
I'd probably
okay.
claim that the farmer is the one with the awareness, I would think.
Well, I've watched some of those sheepdog videos where they're filmed from like a drone, and the farmer's got no control over this situation whatsoever. It's like 300-400 meters away from him, and the dog's doing absolutely everything, and one sheep will stray, and that dog will bring that sheep back into line. Well, how do they notice? Surely if the bulk are doing what they want, that's all that matters. But the fact that they notice that extra one and go around taking the risk that the others could move and all that sort of stuff, yeah, there's awareness there that you can't argue with. They wouldn't be able to retain the information that you teach them otherwise. They just do their own thing. The second that you let them off the lead or whatever, they just fuck off, and they don't.
But I think, I mean, even if that awareness wasn't there to that extent, you know, if you're dealing with animals that have any degree of awareness at all, and if you're dealing with animals that are capable of suffering, then we should not be exploiting them or oppressing them anyway.
Yeah.
Should we?
Proper sheepdog knows its job and it loves it. Yeah, a proper parent loves their child and they love them. What's the
yeah,
difference?
yeah. You see, this is the thing. It's that there's kind of there isn't any excuse for us to oppress and exploit other sentient animals. In other words, animals that have any level of awareness whatsoever. You know, why are we doing it? We don't need to. don't need to do it for our own well-being and survival. So why are we doing it? It has to be wrong. It has to be wrong. There's no excuse, and and no argument for it.
Border collie are brilliant sheepdogs, isn't they? Well, yeah, but mothers live to reproduce, so you've got no more of a point than what you're dismissing in other species. So it's irrelevant, really.
It's actually, the argument for veganism is actually incredibly simple. It's actually a really, 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 really simple case to put, isn't it? If we have a choice between, living in a way that oppresses and exploits others, or living in a way that doesn't do that, aren't we morally bound to choose the way that doesn't do that?
Well,
if we're going to, in a way, be decent human beings, and that end of story, isn't it? Isn't it as simple as that?
Well, it should be as simple as that, but people like to complicate it by extrapolating.
Well, people like to find excuses for kind of. People don't like change. You see, this is the thing, and kind of. We sort of touched on this when we were kind of talking about the COVID and how people got into different habits. We're all creatures of habit. All animals are creatures of habit, and I think the thing is, obviously this huge habit that all of us, had really, unless someone was born and raised, they had vegan parents and they're raised on a vegan diet and taught about veganism, right? And so they've never had animal products or anything like that. And there are a few people like that, but most of us weren't like that. And so, we're raised within a culture where it's just taken for granted that other animals are here for us to.
Hey, I'm the sociologist, Ronnie. I'm supposed to be saying that kind of stuff. But,
not Roger saying.
Actually, what you just said there was interesting in relation to what Jim is saying here. Border collies are brilliant sheepdogs, and they're in their element when rounding up sheep. Fact.
Yeah, but
because that's what they're socialized to do.
Because we got to understand, right, is that all dogs, all dogs were originally wolves. A border collie, right? Even right down to a Chihuahua or a Yorkie or a Dachshund. All of these dogs, they were all originally wolves. And what happened was humans took them and selectively bred them into all the different breeds of dog that we've got today. And without exception, the reason humans did that was in order to facilitate the oppression of other animals. In other words, that most of the dogs were bred for hunting, and some were bred for herding
and guarding.
And guard, it's all to do with, well, even guard dogs originally kind of weren't bred for guarding. The dogs that were bred for guarding, you say German Shepherds. The German Shepherd's called German Shepherd was German Shepherds were bred as a herding dog, shepherd, sheepdog, shepherd, and then they've been used now for guarding.
That's where they used them in the Holocaust, isn't it, as well?
It's a more recent use of them, you see, but originally.
Ronnie, did you ever see that there was a very early program I saw? It must have been the 1980s. I've never been able to track it down, although I can't really say I've really looked that much. It was called The Wolf in Your Living Room. Now I think it was a BBC thing, but I'm not sure. But, there's one for you to track down, Andy. But the point is, I don't even know. I remember it being really interesting, but I mean, it was probably one evening watch, and that was it, So I can't remember much of the details.
That's kind of what's happened. They've all
The
been
wolf,
like
the wolf in your living room. What, from '92?
No, I think it was the 80s. I think, Candy.
Oh, okay.
But
all the wolf-like traits that dogs still have within them because of their ancestry. That's probably what that sounds like. That's what that's about. But that's what's happened, you see, and so they've all been deliberately bred to. So a collie was originally a wolf that's been selectively bred in order to facilitate the oppression of other animals. In other words, herding animals that are going to be eventually taken and killed, to feed humans when we don't need to do that at all. Basically, that's what that is. And so, and what's happening more in kind of more recent years is a lot of those original functions of dogs have kind of faded away, and then they're now used to kind of as so-called pets, aren't they? And you've got Crufts and all the different breeds,
living ornaments, more like.
And yeah, just so they're still exploited, but it's like it's in a different way for most of them. And we have a horrendous situation where, of course, large numbers of dogs are killed every year because because overbreeding of them, and there's no homes available and stuff like that. And so,
well, the other big issue that doesn't get talked about enough is a big part of the problem, which isn't obviously the dog's fault, is the huge diversity of breeds too. So there are so many dogs now, and some of them have still got like prey drives or ancestral traits for them, which means they don't function particularly well in homes.
Well, that's what that program was saying,
zero
Andy.
experience of that breed, and so like these are the dogs that end up in rescue.
Oh yes, because
the amount of people, for example, in the last 4 or 5 years that have gone and got themselves like Belgian Malinois who can't look after them because the dogs need some sort of, I don't know, purpose in life. They need to have that fulfillment, and it's not achieved, and they end up biting someone or they end up doing something, and the dog ends up either being euthanized or shoved in rescue. Because they've had these stuffs like bred into them, all these purposes to serve humans, and now they no longer serve them, but yet they've still retained that information, and it causes them a problem because they can't function in a home like a pet should. They can't just sit on a sofa and be quiet.
No, but that's what that program was saying, Andy. It was saying that all dogs are still kind of wolves at heart.
And people don't realise that. They don't realise.
Yeah, Jim has come back.
I've seen it myself. Yeah, dogs that you wouldn't expect to bolt all of a sudden because they've seen a lamb, that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. That prey drive takes over, and it's instinctual.
Yeah, it is, and then that obviously means that they're very reckless in terms of traffic and that when that kind of stuff happens.
Absolutely that. Yeah. Well, look at the hunt, for example. Look how many times they've been hit by cars or trains, or obviously, again, it's not their fault. It's the fact that they're there in the first place. But they're so driven by what they're doing that there is no danger element.
Yeah, they're just almost like following the bum.
Yeah, look at how many get caught on barbed wire and all sorts. Like they've put themselves at risk because the drive of succeeding to catch whomever is bigger than the risk that's posed to them.
Yeah,
because we're instinct.
Jim has said this is to me, and what's the problem with that's what they've been socialised to do? Talking about the sheep dogs again. Yeah, well, I agree with you, Jim. There's not a problem with that. It's just an explanation for what you were saying about the fact that they're in their element. That's what that's about.
It was wrong that should have happened. It was wrong that humans did that in the first place. It was wrong that we, our species took wolves and bred them into all these different. Just leave them alone. Why do that? Why exploit them and use them in that way, and use them in that way in order to facilitate the oppression of other animals? So you're exploiting and oppressing like one type of animal in order to do the same to many others. So it's like a double, it's a double whammy, isn't it? And really that was a wrong committed. That was something that probably first happened thousands of years ago, but it was a wrongful act when humans did that at the beginning. And we're kind of faced with the consequences of that now, with all these different breeds of dogs that exist, and a lot of them with problems and stuff. And it's a question of how do we deal with that situation? How do we kind of morally extricate ourselves from it? Really.
Yeah. Humans have a god complex. I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's just that that. But basically, because of this attitude that animals are here for us when other animals aren't here for us, they're here with us, aren't they? And so it's this idea that humans had that animals are there, other animals are there to be exploited, for our benefit. That's the kind of, that's what it's all based on, isn't it? It's all based on that on that viewpoint.
Right, guys, I'm not signing off, but I'm gonna mute myself because I need to do some cat work. So I'll see you in a bit, and yeah, catch you later.
No, that's absolutely fine. So I was watching something the other day that was quite interesting. It was talking about the formation of the city of Carthage, and obviously the Carthaginians were quite famous for their use of war elephants.
Yes.
But it was essentially saying that after that kind of dynasty started to die out, it's a great example of how, although these animals were being bred and trained and exploited to more or less have one use, that after that use stopped, they just thrived again in the wild. It's not like they went extinct. They didn't. I mean, they're going extinct now because of ivory. But yet you think how many were killed actually in the aspect of war, and their numbers thrived afterwards because they weren't being exploited.
Well, they were able to recover, I suppose.
Yeah, that's exactly, and they actually thrived. Their numbers actually went up.
And in fact, this is something that could happen on Earth for lots and lots of different species of animals if we didn't actually have animal agriculture, because the amount of land, if we no longer had animal agriculture and we all we're all living on without consuming animal products, just on just on the a diet suitable for vegans, right? Because of that's such an efficient way of producing food. The amount of land that would free up would be huge, and that could all be rewilded to go back to forest and other wild areas, and so you'd have a huge regeneration of animals living in the wild.
Yeah.
It'd be absolutely brilliant. It would be brilliant for us as a species, because it would massively help to combat the climate crisis. In fact, I think just that on its own could combat the climate crisis, even without doing anything about fossil fuels. I think we do need to do something about fossil fuels. We need to stop burning them. But I think if we had sufficient rewilding, that we have to have that anyway, whether or not, whatever happens with fossil fuels, it's vital that we have the rewilding in order to combat the climate crisis. That's really, really important. And so that would be hugely of benefit to humans, to our species. It would also be of huge benefit to very, very large number of other animals as well. It's like a just total win-win situation. And we'd also be able, we'd be able to feed ourselves much more easily and much more efficiently. And when we can be totally self-sufficient in food in this country
Yeah, and I mean, although lots of times they don't get thought about, but the sort of smaller knock-on effects of things like that. Imagine if there was, let's just say, for argument's sake, half of the UK that was now rewilded. The odds of, say, foxes, badgers, rabbits, squirrels all being killed in traffic collisions, that sort of thing, that's going to be significantly reduced also, because they've finally got places to live where they don't have to live by a road or an industrial estate. So, like, there'd be so many
yes,
other changes too.
yeah. I mean, I think we kind of have to look at our transportation system and see, and see what we can do to absolutely minimise casualties. Obviously, the main casualties are animals living in the wild, aren't they? The foxes and the badgers and birds. I think it's estimated that 30 million birds are killed by motor vehicles every year.
I can believe that too. Yeah.
Huge number, and it's something like 100,000 foxes, 50,000 badgers, something like, I don't know, it's
So I
60,000.
suppose, I suppose, I mean, we talked about this a few shows ago. So I
Yeah,
suppose when it comes to, say, the foxes, I mean, let's just keep it in the UK because it's easier. But
yeah,
like the mammals, for example,
yes,
and the rodents, we can talk about like road bridges or those natural bridges
yeah.
or even like an underground. But when it comes to the birds, other than
Well,
not driving,
uh,
what is
well,
the solution?
one thing to do with the birds, you see, is if you had, if at the side of roads, right, you had um, high hedges, then the birds wouldn't go down low enough to be hit by most of
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, yeah, and
it.
obviously the hedges would also potentially form a barrier to stop all their wildlife potentially running through too.
Yeah,
But
and hedges are brilliant. Hedges are brilliant for wildlife as well. Loads
yeah,
of
yeah, 'cause I mean,
living
obviously
hedges.
the habitat then as well.
They,
Yeah,
but that, that's what happens with birds. It's because they go low across the
go
road and they
lower.
get
That
hit by
makes
a.
that makes a lot of sense actually.
Sometimes it's because they're going down on the road to kind of try and feed on a mammal that's been killed.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
So,
One of my very first trips when I'd only passed my test about 2 weeks before, and I was going to move a dog, and I was driving down towards London. I was on the M25 somewhere, and I don't know if it was a Harris hawk or what, but they swooped out to try and grab. I think it was the remains of a rabbit, but how I didn't clip them with my windscreen, I'll never know. But yeah, that was a horrible experience, and I'd only just passed my test.
yeah, yeah,
And that's exactly what they were
yeah.
doing. They were trying to come and grab the piece of roadkill in the middle of the
Yeah.
road.
So we minimise, the deaths of mammals on the roads, and then you'd minimise the deaths of like a lot of birds as well. So, but you see, the thing is, if we had a vegan-run society, we could really focus on that. We could say, well, look, we've got this problem here of animals being killed by our transportation system. How do we do our best to solve that? How do we do our best to minimise the number of casualties? And we could put in all sorts of different
What
measures.
is the current reasoning for? Because like obviously as part of their subsidies and stuff, farmers a lot of the time get commissioned to trim the hedges. What's the idea of keeping them low then? Who does that benefit?
I don't know. I think whether it's kind of traditional or whether some of them only, I don't know whether some of them only grow to a certain height because, it depends on the type of, what that was. But I think most hedges, if left, would probably go pretty high.
Yeah, because I can obviously understand the idea of cutting them so that they don't interfere with the road and branches hang out and all that kind of thing. But surely the height should remain not a problem.
You've got a hell of a lot of this kind of cosmetic sort of treatment of vegetation at the side of roads that's completely unnecessary. If you look at the number of times they mow the grass verges,
yeah,
and very often they don't need to be mowed at all.
I mean, the one that's even the most ridiculous is when they mow the grass verge on like the edge of the highway or something, and I'm like, why? For who? What was that? Who? What were you trying to see? What did you need to see?
There's no purpose of it. If you've got something that's obstructing the line of sight of drivers, I can understand them cutting back that vegetation. But in most cases,
the only one that's actually a risk really is the middle verge, right in between the road. That's the only one that could ever serve a purpose in terms of you can't see cars approaching you if you need to. But either side, I don't understand why they cut it.
I think in certain, I mean, even if you've got a dual carriageway and you've got a middle verge, it doesn't particularly matter that if because the cars are over the other side on a different carriageway, but that doesn't particularly matter how long that gets. And I think with some of these grasses, I think those grasses on verges anyway, they only grow to a certain height. They're not going to grow like 20 foot high. They've got a limited height anyway. So why and there's various problems with that. I mean, first of all, there's this unnecessary work that goes into it and the cost of that, right? Secondly, how many animals are killed when they mow that are living in those verges are killed when they mow the verges, right? That's the second thing. And then also you've got the value of those habitats as well. That they destroy every time they mow. And there's a very good organisation called Plant Life, and I think they campaign against a lot of this mowing of verges and stuff. And so it's well worth having a look at their website because they're very good in that respect. And I know some local authorities have kind of reduced their the amount that they cut the verge. I know because it's normally done by over here in the UK, it'll be done by county councils because they're the ones that are responsible for the highways, rather than because it's the Highways Authority and that comes under the county council rather than the district council.
Yeah.
And I know that where we are in Worcestershire, they have reduced. They still do it. I still see it happening, but they've apparently reduced the amount of mowing of the verges, the cutting of the verges they do, and that was because I think the county council in Norfolk did it, and they pronounced it a success. Because of that, the county council here kind of took a leaf out of their book and did the same. But I think mainly the reason the county council did it here was because it saved money.
Yeah, of course.
That was their main motivation. But it was still, still a good move. But I think they still do it too much, nevertheless, because I still see it done when it's not necessary.
Well, I totally, and it's a real pain as well, isn't it? Because they put the cones out the day before they start cutting, and then they leave them there for about 3 days after they've carried on cutting. So like it's just all completely unnecessary. Not to mention the expense of it all.
Yeah, I think I think I think the golden rule is if you can leave nature alone, leave it alone.
Yeah. But the problem is, as Silver Witch pointed out a bit earlier, it's kind of the aesthetic of it. I mean, I've read discussions before where it's kicked off and not the newspaper because someone's trying to sell their house and the person next door hasn't cut their lawn in 2 years because they want to leave it for the wildlife, and that they're getting complaints, and everyone's in agreement with the house seller. So you should be forced to cut your grass. It looks disgusting. Why should you?
But you see, I think this kind of really once again kind of comes down to vegan education, because you see, if people were educated to have proper respect for other animals, then they'd also have respect for their habitat, because that's where those animals live, that's their home. And so that attitude towards places being left wild would change, would be reversed.
You'd think the lazy factor would kick in with a lot of people as well, and if they thought they could get away with not mowing the lawn or whatever, they wouldn't do it. But it doesn't seem to be the way. I mean, the person underneath me mows the lawn like about every 10 days. Like sometimes I look at it and think it's grown about 1 millimeter. Like, what are you cutting?
Yeah, well, the thing is that you see, gardens could be marvelous habitats for animals living in the wild, because you see, often like farmland isn't, because it's sprayed, isn't it? It's sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and everything like that. So it kind of apart from the sort of hedgerows maybe around the outside, it's not great habitat for
no. And I mean, even a lot of the people that do take the time and care in their garden, they spend quite a lot of money on plants that only last a season or so. And they obviously spend a lot of money on trying to keep others out, whether it's slug pellets or whether it's those alarms. And
it's all, everything's manicured. You've got the lawn, and then you've got the flower beds around the outside that they're mostly planted with annual plants that aren't probably from another country. Do you know what I mean? Not native, and it all looks very, very neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very silly example. When I was doing my window cleaning, we used to do quite a lot of very sort of well-off people, and I can remember that one of the days when we was cleaning the windows on this big house, the gardener got sacked in front of us because the stripes, the mower, the roller leaves, they were going in the wrong direction, and the guy got rid of him. The lawn looked lovely to me, but the stripes were in the wrong direction.
It's just ridiculous, and those are like deserts for wildlife. That type of a garden. You need to kind of let your grass grow a bit, allow it, the sort of flowers that grow in your lawn to kind of. I mean, I can kind of understand in a way people have got kids that want to play on the lawn, to have you can understand, maybe people mowing the lawn, in that kind of.
But even then, I mean, I think if you've got a lawn that's a decent size for the kids to play in or whatever, sectioning off a very small corner.
Yeah, leave the edges,
something like that.
Leave the edges.
Mm-hmm.
To grow, the gardens can be like, they can be havens for animals living in the wild that can't.
In fact, from now on, every single person that mentions bees to me, I'm going to ask them if they let their garden grow. That's my answer from now on. Do
What
you
was
do you cut your grass? Do you prune your bushes? Do you pull your plants out? Because if so, then you're not too
well
conscientious
no,
of the
and
bees.
and also, to kind of encourage your plants, plants that are bee friendly. I mean, we have loads of bees. I mean, we've got lots of borage in our garden, and the bees absolutely love it. We have loads of bees on it. Um, or else we get like a lot of the other thing that we get loads of that love the borage is the scarlet tiger moth caterpillars, and sometimes we have loads of we have had years some isn't every year, but every so often we'll get masses of these scarlet
Yeah,
tiger moth tiger moths that are lovely, that hatch from the caterpillars that feed on the borage. The borage feeds those caterpillars. It feeds the bees, and then of course it dies back, and then it comes back because it's a perennial. It will come back the next year. It's not something you have to keep planting, and that kind of there's loads of stuff that's great for bees, and it isn't just people often think of bees in terms of like honeybees. People have for honey, and you know
yeah.
um, but there's loads and loads of different varieties of
Well,
bees.
one of the things that I've definitely noticed just in my lifetime, so I'm sure you most certainly have, is when I was a kid and I would sit in like my nan's garden or my mum and dad's garden, there'd be an abundance of insects like all over the
Yeah,
place. Whereas now, some summers, I think I
yeah.
haven't seen an insect. I mean, like we're not just it's very noticeable to see the
Yes.
reduction.
We notice exactly the same. Now our garden is like really wildlife friendly, but despite that, we've still seen a reduction in insects, and I think it's because of what people are doing elsewhere. But
Yeah,
we've also had a big reduction in like slugs and snails, and we don't kill the slugs and snails. We just let them do their thing. But like we've had a huge reduction in them as well. Something
yeah,
is
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's another really good point. You used to, if I
yeah,
took the dog for a walk after we'd had say like a heavy rain shower or a load of rain, the pathways used to once upon a time be littered with slugs to the point that
yeah.
you'd have to sort of like maneuver around them. Whereas yeah, I don't see them anything
It's
like you used to.
not as nearly that's not nearly as much. So something's happening, and we're not doing it. But somewhere around there are things happening that are killing, and of course that has a knock on effect because other animals feed on those. Like birds, for instance, and
Yeah,
frogs,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
dogs, and that feed on. I mean, I go out in the morning and spend ages feeding the birds. Because their natural food sources have been depleted. I think we kind of feed the hedgehogs as well because of course their natural food is like gone. You
yeah,
know, and
yeah.
that's a real that is like a huge problem. And there's actually been a massive. I remember reading an article the other day. There's been a massive reduction in the number of insects.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's definitely something that I've
yeah,
absolutely noticed just in my
yeah,
lifetime of like walking the dog and that sort of thing. Yeah. Even to the point where it's like a warm summer night and you'd see like gnats in a big swarm. You just don't see
not
insects like you used to.
not nearly as much. And of course, that does have a knock-on effect because other animals that's their food source.
Yeah, of course, of course. And obviously that has a knock-on effect on the further up the chain as well. So, the amount of, say, small mammals, rodents and birds that aren't feeding on those insects. Then you've got the bigger mammals like the foxes and badgers that,
Yeah, uh,
their food source is being depleted. And then you see them starting to come into residential, all sorts of knock-on effects. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's obviously something we're doing because like I said,
Yeah,
I've seen it just in my lifetime to the point where it's significant. You can look at it and think, wow,
yeah.
once
It's
upon a
definitely
time, the air would be filled with insects all over the place, and you don't see them anymore.
yeah, and that's all happened in really quite a short period of time. To be honest, maybe within the last 10, 20 years. I think we've had. I mean, we've lived in this house now for I think it's about 15 years, and since we've been here, I've noticed a significant reduction in insects and in the slugs and snails from when we first came here.
Yeah.
So it's really quite recent, and that's like you know even more worrying that it's been so rapid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, when anyone ever talks about this, it is only bees that they talk about. And when they say bees, they actually only mean honeybees as well.
I
But
mean,
all the other hundreds of pollinators that there
yeah,
are out there that we rely on, there's no consideration at all for
and
them.
well, wasps are brilliant pollinators, but you couldn't. You see, I was involved in a Friends of the Earth campaign. It's probably the most successful campaign that Friends of the Earth ever ran, and it was just a few years ago. It's kind of just a bit before the COVID and all that came, and it's like a Save the Bees campaign, and they were like campaigning for the government to put in various measures to to kind of protect bees. You see, because of how wonderful bees were as pollinators and stuff, and there was all sorts of materials. Uh, connected bits, and it was really, we did stalls for it. It was like really, really popular, and had a degree of success because I think the government did agree to some of it, but then later went back on some of the things they'd agreed to. Surprise, surprise. But that was kind of focused on bees because, of course, Friends of the Earth knew that bees are really popular, because they could have said, let's say wasps, because wasps are brilliant pollinators as well.
Absolutely.
But
The difference is though, bees potentially provide a service. You see, I mean, actually, as
well,
pollinators go, they're not great bees. There's plenty of other much better pollinators
yeah,
out there
but
in terms of the job that they do. Because bees
well,
obviously take quite a lot for themselves as
well,
resources. So it's only
yes,
the benefit that bees provide that people are
yeah.
interested in. If
Well,
we didn't exploit them, people wouldn't care about bees either.
I think it's the kind of, yeah, because people have got this kind of positive attitude towards bees, whereas their attitude towards wasps sting. Wasps are
Yeah,
those animals
absolutely. Yeah, and I
that sting.
mean, if anyone actually understood the cycle of a wasp, you'd absolutely understand why they're a bit pissed off, especially towards the
But
end of the summer when that pheromone's no longer being released and they've no longer got a purpose. And they've basically, I mean, to look at it from a human point of view, it's kind of like you've been strung along by your dream queen for the last 6 months with the idea of getting something. And then just before the chance of that happening, you're basically told, yeah, you're useless, get out. You're not even welcome in the house anymore. Go find
yeah,
somewhere to die, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But you see, the thing is that there's loads those kind of wasps that kind of are known to sting. There's loads and loads and loads and loads of other species of wasp that kind of don't sting, and a lot
Yeah,
of them are
and
like
I mean, if you think of how many billions of wasps there are and how many
yeah,
times you get
loads
stung
and
in your
loads of
life,
different.
come on, they're not. It's not like they're
There's
going out of their way
loads.
to sting you.
Yeah, there's loads of different species of wasp, and there's loads of different species of bee. It's not just the honeybee, but people mainly think about the honeybee. But it's really interesting that, because I often talk about George Monbiot's book Regenesis, where he talks all about the farming system and everything. And he mentioned in there about honeybees, and he said that there's some environmentalists that actually think that honeybees, in general terms, with the whole area of pollination, that honeybees are actually harmful.
Yeah, they are. They're absolutely. They're a
There's-
crap pollen. Honestly, I mean, I'm going to
yeah,
have a bit of a go at bees. I'm going to be honest. They're not a very good efficient pollinator. It's the fact that we can exploit them, and
I,
also the problem is as well, big time, that people don't talk about is a lot of the native bees that are being wiped out are being wiped out because the honeybees are bigger, faster, stronger. There's more of them, and they've got less distance to travel from bush to hive. So essentially, the native bees that we're also worried about, supposedly, are actually being killed off for the most part because of the huge abundance of honeybees, which nobody seems to have an issue with.
yeah. I mean, that's very much what he was saying. That they displace other bees, and the other bees that
Yeah,
they
because it's in, there's mites
yeah
that Joey was talking about the other day on the Piers show. Yeah, they originate from honeybees. They're not native. So they're being, those parasites and those
yeah
mites that are killing the native bees are only being passed on from honeybees. So if the honeybees didn't exist,
yeah. You see, yeah, and a lot of these other bees that have been displaced or killed off because the honeybees are actually better pollinators.
yes,
The
absolutely. Yeah.
collective pollinators of that
I can't think of the
yeah.
name of them, but the ones that live in the grass. They make like a burrow in the grass. Those are really great pollinators, and obviously they're not using any of it for honey either. So all of it's kind
No,
of it's just for them.
yeah. But you see, I think the thing is, it's another example of where the human exploitation of other animals has kind of, yeah, okay, it's not great in terms of those other animals that have been exploited, but it also causes problems, you know, for yet other groups of animals, and also for ourselves. And that's very, very similar to animal agriculture in terms of the harm that animal agriculture causes to the natural world and animals living in the wild, and then to us as well, because of the harm that it does to the environment. You see, so that with the honeybees is really quite similar to that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, because people don't kind of think very far on these things, do they? They just think,
Well, the thing is, for a lot of them, they're not actually. I mean, obviously, they're not bothered about the bee in general, but it's not actually their argument. It's not that they've thought about this and gone, hang on, what about the bees? It's that they've heard someone else say it and they haven't even realised what the position is. They've just repeated the same thing, because the vast majority of people that you try and have this conversation with don't want to have a conversation. They just want to say, "Oh, you don't care about the little guys," and that's their position. They're not interested in actually hearing what yours is or whether that's true or not. They're just repeating the rhetoric that they've heard from Piers Morgan or whoever, and that's they don't actually know this information. And I'm pretty sure if you explained it the way we've just done to most people, they go, "Oh, honeybees, yeah. Well, I mean, they're a problem. Yeah, they absolutely are."
Yes, yeah. That's right. But it's not their fault. I mean, obviously,
No, it's absolutely not their fault. It's what they've been socialised and conditioned to believe.
There are people might say, "Oh, they're just insects and they don't feel anything." But there's been a study fairly recently. It's come to the conclusion that that honeybees are actually sentient. They do, that they do have a have a level of awareness.
Yeah.
And that's been, it's a scientific paper that came out quite recently on that subject. And then, of course, that makes you wonder about other insects as well, if that's the case with.
Well, yeah, I mean, even when it comes to ants, you look at the complexity, say, of like, even if you look at it in like, what are them things called where you have it in like a glass case and you watch them, is it Ant Farm? Even if you look at it in like them, the complexity of that nest that they build and the way that we could not replicate that, even with all the science and all the technology, we could not do that. And they know which ant belongs in their colony and which doesn't, and they will even form barriers sometimes if they're carrying or they're rooting down and they're all moving in like a line. They'll have like soldier ants that form barriers to protect them from come on, there's evidence that they have awareness. It might be real basic awareness, but they have it.
Yeah, I think
it's there.
I think there is evidence there, and I think you've kind of got to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely, yeah.
And do our best to avoid harming them. I mean, it can be very difficult when you're talking about such tiny animals to kind of avoid maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you think of how small an ant is.
Yeah.
And then you think of how small their brain must be. But yet they recognise one another from other colonies or from other ants or what. So even in that tiny, tiny, tiny brain that they have, there's still enough there to understand the difference between one and another. Whether that's based on smell, sight, sound, I don't know. I can't answer that part. But they definitely can distinguish. And that's not in the level of an awareness. They know that I am one particular ant, but other ants that aren't me exist. That's not only self-awareness, but that's awareness of others.
Yeah, yes, and I think that's that's kind of why we have to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of like doing our best not to harm them, really, for that reason, because that's that's the right way to do, rather than to kind of go the other way with it. And kind of once again, in terms of how we operate within society, we have to kind of take notice of that, really, don't we?
Yeah.
But anyway, mate, I think I'm going to have to go.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was going to say I was only going to go till 10 anyway, so that suits me fine.
Smash it. So we shall speak soon, and hopefully I can be back next week. I'm not really sure what's happening next Saturday, but anyway, I think Roger's not back, is he? He's still.
I think he joined the chat, but yeah, I don't think he was going
Yeah.
to come and join us again. But yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you everyone for joining us. Yes, potentially we'll be here same time next week, 8
Yeah.
o'clock.
Yeah. Take care, everyone, and
Thank you and take care. Yes, speak to you
tune
soon.
in next Saturday for another enthralling conversation.
Yeah, hopefully next week we're a bit more organised and we've got a subject to discuss.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, no worries. I'll speak to everyone soon. Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye.